range of specialisms. I will ask them to introduce themselves in a moment, but first, housekeeping. This session will be recorded and transcribed. If you don't wish to appear, please keep your cameras off. We will be taking questions for the panel in the chat. Given the large number of people, I might try to summarize some of those questions to kind of keep us moving. If you have a question for a specific panel member, please do make sure you put that right at the start of the question. A reminder that Data Connect sessions all contribute to your One Big Thing. If you haven't already, please sign up to One Big Thing and log these hours. This session will give you an hour of not only learning, but also to that One Big Thing. Housekeeping ends. Now, I think it's safe to assume that everyone here has read about, discussed with colleagues, or is working with Gen AI in some form, be it large language models such as ChatGPT, Bard, new tools such as Microsoft Copilot, GitHub Copilot if you're a developer. But what certainly I'm seeing is organizations in both public and private sector grappling with the question, but what does this mean for us? So I'd like to start by asking our panel members to introduce themselves, but also to give a brief overview of what they're seeing as the opportunities and challenges of public sector adoption of Gen AI. Matt, I'm going to come to you first.
Hello everyone, good morning. I'm Dr. Matthew Gregory. I'm the lead data scientist on the UK government's website gov.uk, and currently I'm leading an artificial intelligence team that's interested in exploring whether emerging technologies like large language models or LLMs can help users when they interact with government. I think this is a great question to kick off with, and I'm going to approach it wearing two hats. So the first hat is that of an individual civil servant. So like most civil servants, I've got a fairly complicated job that consists of a variety of tasks. And I think it's through this lens of tasks that we can see opportunities for AI to help us out. I think AI can help us do things like write emails, help me when I'm feeling a bit rusty with my SQL. But I think it's important to note that a human is always involved in the loop. So the human helps validate things. So you always need those expertise. I think the challenges in this space are around people learning how to use this new technology safely and effectively. I think like any new tool, it takes time to learn how to do that. And one of the risks of things like people submitting personal data and leaking official information. But I'm optimistic that these things will get better with time as people learn how it all works. I think that then segues onto me wearing my second hat, which is that of someone leading a team building an experimental gov.uk chat system. Like Jenny said, lots of people and industries are interested in this kind of thing. The premise is, can we let a user ask a question in natural language and get an accurate answer based on some of our own data or documents? So on gov.uk, it'd be like asking a question of the gov.uk content estate. Everyone else is trying to do this, but we're not like everyone else. We're the public sector, and we've got additional challenges when we're thinking about the product market fit of these chat systems. I think one of the most important areas for us, or like one of the risks, is the issue of trust. I think our users need to trust our systems outputs, and I think arguably the cost of errors could be higher in the public sector than in the private sector. Just giving someone incorrect guidance or something like that. So I think the question remains, can systems built with this technology achieve that high standards? I'm not sure anyone knows that yet, because it's probably sensitive to the context of your use case and like how expensive the errors are going to be. And that's why my team on gov.uk has approached it using a phased approach. And I think that's the right way to approach this. Like with any new technology, you build it step by step. And the way we've been doing it is like building, iterating, building, showing it to users, seeing what users think, and only then using that sort of gated approach, we ask the question, do we think we can get value here? Is it useful? And we're at the stage now where we're hoping to test this with a large number of users, and through that we can learn and provide estimates around some of these risks that we care about, things like hallucinations, accuracy of the system, and we'll get some numbers and some data to support it. Because one of the challenges I see is the development of this stuff isn't very scientific. It tends to happen on Twitter. So people will tweet, oh, look, here's the large language model doing well, here's one doing badly, and you get a very polarized view. So I think it's important to approach this empirically, and I think that's what we're trying to do on our team.
Brilliant.
So in conclusion, I think the journey one with Gen AI is not merely a technological thing, it's a societal one. And I think as we navigate the complexities of enhancing public services, we need to think about things like trust, transparency, and equity. I think we're not just building chatbots, we're trying to think about how government and public service interacts with one another. And I think that's going to be really interesting for us with all sorts of opportunities and risks over the next few years. Sorry I spoke for a while, but as you can tell, I'm really interested in this topic space. So thanks for a great question.
Thanks, Matt. Lisa.
Hi everybody, I'm Lisa Allen. I'm the Director of Data and Tech Services at the Open Data Institute. I'm also Chair of DAMA UK, the Data Management Association. I've worked in public sector previously to the ODI for about 20 years at the Environment Agency with Jenny, actually, Ordnance Survey, and DEFRA. So for those of you who don't know the ODI, we're a not-for-profit organisation that was set up 10 years ago by Sir Tim Berners-Lee and Sir Nigel Shadbolt. And at the ODI, we're looking at working on what can you demonstrate trustworthy data practices. And data is a really important part of feeding generative AI. So I always talk about, I know there's a lot of focus on Gen AI, but it's like, well, what are you feeding it? So that's the angle we really look at. And we also look at quite a lot of ethics and bias that goes on. So if I summarize some of the biggest challenges I see, I think there's several actually. I don't know if I can summarize them, and we'll unpick these today. So lack of transparency of how the data is generated in generative AI. How do you know you can trust the outputs? So some of the things Matt touched on there. There's quite a lot of fear actually from organizations. So I know some that have just gone out and banned it. But does that work? Because actually I bet people are using it around the side. So can just banning it work? Lack of understanding of what happens. I don't know if any of you tried to read the terms and conditions of ChatGPT. I have. And it's a little bit like a black box. And trying to understand those things in there is really interesting, even just like where the data is stored, where it's coming from, all the things you normally do for compliance. And then the pace of development is fast. So I've been working on with the team on now our own policy on generative AI and our use cases. And it feels like every week I'm having to update it because something has changed or some other way we can do it. And then that's without even considering the ethical or personal data concerns. But there are massive opportunities here if we use it in the right way. So I think, though, it's about how do we use it on a use case approach. So what are the risks and benefits, and we can carefully consider them. So we all know that generative AI is really good for identifying patterns. So you can see that it's really great for things like healthcare. It's really good for helping you check your code. But we also know that it hallucinates. So it's not good for factual content. So I think the biggest opportunity for me is about finding the right use cases and applying them and understanding those risks as well as those opportunities.
Thanks, Lisa. Mike.
Yes, thanks. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Mike Katell. I'm an ethics fellow with the Allen Turing Institute. And the Turing, we're very interested in questions around everything AI, actually. But in particular, we're focused quite a bit right now on foundation models and generative AI and large language models and the like. And we're working with multiple sectors of government at the moment to help different agencies, departments, and ministries understand their obligations and help them craft guidance and so on around how they can safely and ethically use these very powerful tools. And it's certainly an exciting time in AI. I mean, the breakthroughs in generative AI are really demonstrating the power of this technology. And that sort of leads me into talking about the opportunities here. I mean, we are seeing AI being applied or attempts to apply it in so many domains of our lives and so many important decisions that everything from public benefits distribution to managing immigration and borders and beyond, certainly in the public sector. But these are not just technical problems. These are social questions, right? And so I think one of the incredible opportunities we have right now in this moment of impactful technology, this generative AI, are these conversations that we're having about our social systems, right? So when we ask questions about who should have public benefits and whether we should trying to use AI to answer that question, we also have to look at the first question: who should we be giving public benefits to, or who should we be denying them from, and so on. And these are these are conversations that we always need to be having, but being able to bring them more to the foreground, right, and to place them more directly in front of us is an excellent opportunity, I think, for moving our society forward. And for elevating some really important conversations that we're having to have. The list of risks, of course, from using these technologies is extensive, and they aren't just risks; they aren't just imaginative risks. They are actual harms that we already see happening. In particular, I'm doing some work with some partners at the Institute for the Future of Work, and we're looking at the question, Queen Mary University of London as well, by the way, in which we are looking at the impact of generative AI on the cultural workforce, on creative workers, right? And everything from altering an understanding of what is the meaning of authorship in creative work, to larger questions, larger structural questions about who should have the power to decide when an AI should be used in cultural production, and how that and what kinds of rights and working conditions that leaves for the many thousands of cultural workers that we value and cherish in our societies, and that we want to continue to have a role to play in our society. But there are also these much more bread and butter risks and real harms. I mean, I cite the terrible situation that happened in the Netherlands that was reported in the last year, in which an algorithmic system used to decide who should be allocated benefits and who should be denied their benefits was set loose, and the result was the denial of benefits to deserving citizens. Thousands of citizens lost access to their public benefits for many months, while the government claimed that the system was foolproof. And in some cases, people actually died due to being denied access to their benefits. And so, when we talk about risk, it's often tempting to talk about long-term horizon scanning risks, existential risk. Oh, what if it's used to design a bioweapon, and so on. And these are conversations we ought to be having, but we really ought to also be looking very close to home about the kinds of risks and harms that can befall people in the United Kingdom and elsewhere right now, and in part, going back to my earlier point, because we're using AI to extend a variety of social systems that have their own flaws, and we need to be looking at those flaws both in the social setting and also in the technical setting, so that we understand what we're doing. So, just to close, I want to say that AI is such an expansive technology. It's like a 360-degree technology that is not just a tool that fixes a broken light or something like that. It's an extension of our social selves, of our society, and so we need to be thinking in terms, when we think about the AI that we want to have in the world, we're also making a statement about the kind of society that we want and the kind of future that we want. And I hope it's one that is of shared prosperity and fairness. So thank you.
Ravinder.
Hi, everyone. Myself, Ravinder Singh. Emerging tech and innovation. So, generative.
You're just dropping out, Ravinder. I think your audio is cutting out and in again.
Is it okay now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Take it from the top.
Okay. So myself, Ravinder Singh, I'm a Modernizing Technology Program Manager with CDDO. So I am leading on emerging tech and innovation as sustainability within modernizing technology. So currently, as Jenny said, we are working on the development of generative AI framework and guidance for civil servants. I was leading on the two aspects, which was pathfinders and use cases in generative AI framework, and as well as sustainability area of that. So as the question goes, opportunities and challenges in generative AI and LLMs going forward. There are lots of opportunities which are available, and I have been speaking at AI Summit and others, public sector data live, API days also on this topic. So one is the back office operations, which can be quite easily managed by the LLMs and large language models and generative AI. And some of the departments are already doing it. Searching is another, which probably everyone is using. And also development of the various documents, as we say, whether it's a business case, proposal, policy, that you can take help from the generative AI capabilities. The challenges, of course, there are many. A couple of them we already have been taught, said, which is trust, ethics, privacy of the data. That's why we always say that don't share the official data on the public LLMs. And also on the other challenges on the sustainability side, which is because these systems of generative AI, the computing systems, they are basically energy consuming devices. They use lots of energy. If I just give you an example, that if you put 100 LLM requests within 10 minutes, it uses 0.35 kilowatts of energy, which is huge. So if you go on doing those kind of searches, so it can be so as you train the model, you take kind of hundreds of hours or thousands of hours to train, and that's where while you are creating that learning mechanism around it. So that could be a very energy consuming system. So you need to be aware of. For that, you need to take care of the things like data and that the right amount of data which you should collect, so that data which data you should need. Only use hardware accelerators and cloud services, monitor and manage the resource allocation. So that those things are biggest challenge where you have to address, and algorithms and the models which you choose for developing your system, that should be optimized for the use of the particular thing which you are trying to do. So each model cannot be used, or each algorithm cannot be used for particular things. So you need to be selective and study that model which you can use. So I think there are lots of opportunities as well as challenges, but we should be careful while we are using the data, while thinking of the carbon, net zero carbon, it is produced, carbon dioxide it is going to produce. So that's my take on LLMs.
Thanks, Ravinder. Claire.
Good morning, everyone. Lovely to be here. My name is Claire Dugan. I'm a business analyst and responsible AI go-to-market lead at Microsoft. Part of my role entails ensuring that we build responsible AI standards into all of our solutions and products. Aside from that, I also research themes of power, structures, data justice, and user AI experience. So the first challenge I'll speak to, and just nod to many of my colleagues who have identified numerous harms from LLMs, but one particular challenge that's been concerning to me is the manipulation of chatbots fueled by large language models to manipulate users via human-like behavior, where the user is not aware they're interacting with an AI system or chatbot. This could lead to misinformation, security breaches via phishing, and emotional harms. On the opportunity lens, I think, with any technology, it's going to become a tool, both a mirror back to us, but also one that can augment our more mundane tasks and hopefully leave room for creativity and innovation. Another opportunity I see, particularly within the public sector, is to really consider new and other lenses that will help track innovation and understanding how we collectively as a society govern AI going forward. Some of those lenses include the feminist perspective, the ecological perspective, historical perspectives, and non-Western identities. This ensures that we're building governance solutions within our tech that represent society.
Alex.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm Alex Smith. I'm head of data security at CDDO, and I've also been working on our generative AI framework guidance alongside Ravinder and Jenny. But I've been sort of focusing on the sort of security aspects. I think it's basically been covered off by the whole panel here, so I haven't really got very much to add. But in terms of the opportunities, I think at the moment, like LLMs came to everyone's attention with the release of ChatGPT, and chatbots have been the kind of focus of the sort of go-to application for this technology. But actually, I don't really see that as the transformative part of this. I think the sort of transformative part to my mind as a sort of superannuated ex-developer is that it's really a new way of interfacing with software. So essentially, it provides a natural language interface to a software system. So I'm really interested in some of those developments, and using patterns where we take LLMs and you can basically make them do things so they can produce a response and then act on it. And there's plenty of libraries out there that are sort of working on this approach, like Python, LangChain, and Microsoft Semantic Kernel, things like that. And people are developing amazing applications through them. So that's where I think it's really going to be transformative, and less on the kind of sort of super Google, super search. You ask it a question, it gives you a possibly an accurate answer. So in terms of the challenges, I think that there's certainly a bit of a challenge in the increasing reliance on all these closed models from all the tech giants, because basically we're just going to have to, speaking to what I'm very aware that Claire's sort of with her other hat on is from Microsoft, that those tech giants do actually live up to their responsible AI kind of standards and principles, and we're sort of reliant on them to do that. That said, the open models also present some risks, because I think people on the call have already mentioned, like around sort of model poisoning and things, and bad actors can release things on open models where they can be manipulated, perform malicious actions. I think that sort of thing's already been seen. But I think the most immediate biggest risk for use of this stuff in government is the reputational one. So it's really around, and I think Matt spoke to this initially, around we have to live up to our service standards in CDDO. Point 5 is that make sure everyone can use our services. So we've got to be especially mindful of all the possible harms that these things could cause if we rushing out sort of ill-tested LLM applications. And for me, a key unsolved problem for LLMs is prompt injection. Essentially, by their very nature, they can't discern system commands from user input, making it very difficult to keep them within their guardrails. At the moment, it's an unsolved problem. So I think it then becomes, what's your risk appetite when you deploy that system? And a civil servant, as a civil servant, you've got the Daily Mail test. It's like, will it pass the Daily Mail test? Probably not at the moment. So I think that Matt's kind of approach, where you're taking things cautiously, you're testing all the time, and you're reporting back to discern whether you can do this in a trustful way, I think that's very key. But yeah, that was my thoughts.
Thanks all. We've heard quite a lot there around different use cases and different kind of the use case approach, and from Matt around that kind of phased approach. We've talked a lot about the opportunities for kind of mundane tasks and automation. But I'm really interested to pick up, and actually in the chat there's been a couple of questions around ethics and regulations. So in terms of the ethics and legal catching up, and the expectations of the public. So I guess a question then about how do we strike that balance between all of those opportunities and benefits that we've mentioned, and the kind of risks that we're also flagging around things like transparency and ethics, the regulation side. Claire, I'd be really interested to, I guess, start off with yourself.
Certainly, it's a really good question, and I think one that encompasses the time we live in and the fact that we're having these types of conversations. I'll speak from a Microsoft perspective and address how we're addressing some of these harms and challenges within our product development and go-to-market solutions with effectively our Microsoft Responsible AI standard. Now, I'll pop this in the chat window for reference, but the standard's built around 6 principles aligning to our company culture: accountability, transparency, fairness, reliability, and safety, all on the pillars of privacy and security and inclusiveness. Now, these standards not only align with company values, but they have specific goals underneath each standards, as you can see identified. And these goals define how we uphold the principles, but they're not just kind of, I would say, like fluffy ideologies. They actually have trackable metrics or key performance indicators, KPIs, underneath each to understand how we're actually enacting these goals through requirements that enable, depending on the solution or the technology, those standards to be brought to life. Under each standard, we also have particular tools aligning to Microsoft's suite of technologies, but also ones that interact with Microsoft's suite of technologies. One example of this is the Azure Content Safety Studio for large language models, in which we look at content moderation and mitigation of harms that may arise from large language models. Now, I think starting with standards is a practical way for preemptively identifying, quantifying, and addressing potential harms, but it also documents a common language or taxonomy for everyone to understand the potential harms and mitigations of such harms. It also fosters interoperability across systems. So if everyone's working towards the same standard with, again, those predefined qualifiable, to Matt's point on empirical evidence, like we do need to be understanding the outputs of any system from a data perspective. And it also advocates with a principles-led approach for diverse perspective. So to my point in my introduction, bringing in other lenses such as non-Western, feminist or design justice lenses. Now, I'll speak to how we would look at mitigation of potential harms of a large language model, again, enacting these principles. But effectively, it's a iterative, layered approach that includes experiment and measurement. And there's 4 layers of technical mitigations we look at across language models: the model, the safety system, meta prompting and grounding, and the user experience. And I'll just also pop that in. I'm being a Microsoftie, I'm used to PowerPoint, and in Slack, I'll just use the chat window to send some visuals to all. I myself am a visual learner, so I hope this helps some on the call. But effectively, what I've just shared looks at the particular actions underneath all of those mitigation layers. And of course, it's important to note that this is not a one and done thing. It's something that's done across the life cycle of any deployment, and is not also done in development. As we move forward with the technology, we'll consider updating these and adding new tools to address harms.
Thanks, Claire. And I'm interested then, I guess, Mike, coming to yourself, you mentioned about some of the risks that you're seeing and the wider thinking around social systems. How does this kind of relate then to those looking at things like the ethics and legal around having an organizational set of principles and those kind of things?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And yeah, I mean, it's great to hear what Claire has to say about the efforts that are going on at Microsoft. And it's also it is somewhat reassuring to hear the language that Claire is using about, making sure that the right people are in the room, considering non-Western perspectives. These are all extremely important from an ethical point of view. But I have to, my biggest concern right now about LLMs and generative AI is the tremendous concentration of power that is happening with who actually has these tools and controls these tools and builds these tools. I mean, Alex made some reference to this as well, and this is just a handful of companies in the United States, Microsoft among them, are have basically full reign over these tools and technologies, and for that reason alone, I think that the government and public sector bodies need to be very cautious in how they approach the use of these technologies. It's a matter of sovereignty, national security, and also it goes beyond that. I mean, the fact that a company like Microsoft has these principles that they adhere to is encouraging, but it's not the same as law. These are voluntary standards, basically, that that work only until they don't, or work only until they no longer meet other important objectives for the company. And we look at where we're at with LLMs, and we can see how this is a problem. I mean, I personally, I think the introduction of ChatGPT last year was reckless. It was a tool. It was basically a giant dangerous tool that was handed off to everyone of any age and any capability and any interest in it. It's a tool so powerful. And then the CEO of OpenAI goes on a speaking tour to tell us all about existential risk from the tools that he's producing, right? I mean, that does not speak to me of any sort of corporate responsibility. There's no set of principles or voluntary standards that defends Sam Altman in the world from, on the one hand, blithely introducing these incredibly powerful tools, and then on the other hand going, telling everyone how dangerous they are. I mean, there's just an absurdity about that. And similarly, the introduction to deep fake technologies before ChatGPT was also incredibly reckless, and it was taking place in academic institutions and so on, and grant money was being thrown at it left and right without really any clear, forecasting or thinking about the future harms. Now, legally, I'd say that I am very encouraged by the EU's actions in formulating their AI Act. Focusing on risk is a good start. It's a way of thinking through some of these technologies in the most sort of immediate way about like what we can do to prevent the worst things from happening, and even at a mundane level. But it really is just a start, because what that does, what it fails to do, is again address this concentration of power question. I mean, we have President von der Leyen made her State of the Union speech in celebrating the AI Act, and also talking about the dangers of technology. But at the same time, there are photos of her shaking hands with who? Sam Altman from OpenAI, and parroting his words about the risk profile of these tools, right? So it's unclear. It seems like there's so much eagerness and excitement and even anxiety about being left behind, right? About the competitive aspect of participating in this moment of generative AI, that governments in particular, I think, are being a little bit heedless and probably placing a little bit too much trust in these massive corporations, who at the end of the day, despite their best intents and principles and the personal ethics of people who work in those companies, at the end of the day, the bottom line is what matters to them, and the power that they're accumulating from their control over these technologies is incredibly important to them. So I think we just need to be incredibly cautious. I think the UK would be wise to adopt strong regulatory standards similar to the EU's. But the UK is in a position to lead here, right? The EU Act the EU's AI Act is just a starting point. We have a strong tradition of dedication to human rights and fundamental rights in this country, and I think we need to champion that and move forward and aggressively work to ensure that these new tools work for all of our benefits, and not just for a handful of companies, primarily in the United States.
And I guess coming from that, then, Lisa, you mentioned kind of the development of the kind of framework, and also you kind of talked a bit about, again, the kind of pace of development and the transparency side. And I know governance is quite an important part. Can you, I guess, talk a bit around the kind of challenges from the ethics, legal kind of perspective, but also in the chat, the really interesting question around is data management still important?
Yeah, I love that question from Ben. The quick answer on that one is yes, but I'll come to why. So yeah, I think it's always good to think about what are we talking about when we talk about data ethics. So we talk about it as a branch of ethics that evaluates data practices that have the potential to adversely impact on people and society, and that data collection, sharing and use. And often I think data ethics gets conflated with data protection. So data protection is the law. And often things that are ethical may end up in law. I think like Michael was just talking about, actually some of these regulations are not there today. So when is it important that actually these things need to be put into regulation? We've seen with data management and the practices we're looking at and reflecting on, do we still need data management? Well, what's feeding the AI is, all these data sets that are going in there. So you need to know that you've got the right privacy, the security, the standardization. There's all the things in the ethics, the permissions, all that stuff goes on. So all the foundational things you think about for data management are still as important today. It may be actually that the generative AI can help you with it. It could help you if you see if your data actually complies with a standard. So I think that it definitely is needed, and it is just evolving how you do it. And I think with the legislation, it's interesting. So, seeing how different countries are reacted. So thinking about the data management side, I think China just legislated in August about that you need to show what data's been feeding the results. So again, that's about that lineage and stuff that people in the data world would understand that is critical is still there. You've got the work that's going on at the moment in Poland with the researcher who's put into complaint of the Polish ICO. They are now looking, or their equivalent of the ICO, now that they're looking into and investigating the complaint from this researcher about ChatGPT, because actually there was, the researcher asked ChatGPT to create a bio, and if anybody hasn't done this on yourself, you do need to do it, because it's quite hilarious what's come back. You get the hallucinations, and when he's gone back to ChatGPT and asked them to correct it, they've not been able to. So actually, when you think about the GDPR and the right to rectification, they've not been able to do it. So it's been interesting to see how some of this unfolds. So I think this leads into the pace of change. Is it that the legislation we've got is good enough for this today? How does it need to evolve? I mean, if you think for the Data Protection Act, it was 1998, I think, when the original one came out, and then 2018. I think that was the Titanic film was out when the first Data Protection Act came out. I don't think you can wait such a long time with this move of technology. So I think it's really important that actually how does legislation set the overall standard without inhibiting innovation? There's going to be a real balance between those things, that keeping that safety, stopping harms, but without stifling innovation. So yeah, so Ben's question, yes, I'm more than happy to chat about that one.
And Matt, I guess as somebody actually kind of living this and implementing, a use case, how are you, I guess, addressing those kind of ethical, legal, and wider kind of concerns at the moment?
So we're lucky at GDS and in gov.uk that we've got access to a diverse team and a diverse skill set. So we recognised early on the importance of data privacy, some of these ethical questions. So we engaged with our data protection officers and we talked them through, and we said, hey, people are interested in testing out this technology. Here's what we want to do. Let's work it out together. So we did a data protection impact assessment. And that's sort of what the panel have been talking about. Like, there's legal compliance that you need to adhere to. So have those conversations early, information assurance, all that kind of good stuff. And I think there's a challenge for government, like, do all teams have access to these skill sets? If not, they might be constrained in what they can and can't do safely. Because the challenge with these technologies, as Michael hinted at, all the tech giants hold the power, but in some ways the power is transferred to the user. So as a developer or data scientist, I can knock up a prototype very quickly that looks good and does something quite useful. But that's also a risk in that things can speed ahead, which is why I think you need this stepped, staggered, careful approach, and you need to evaluate as you go. And when you evaluate, start off with a small number of users. You need humans in the loop validating it. So we use content experts. So people who know the content very well to say, hey, the system's producing plausible answers, it's doing well. But the challenge is, if you're only testing with like tens to hundreds of users, you might not pick up some of those edge cases that could be very harmful and damaging to a user. So you might want to scale, but don't scale too soon, because you still need to spend time doing your due diligence and assessing. I mean, basically, as a scientist, the things I want to do is like have a good point estimate for some of these metrics that I care about. So accuracy, hallucination rate, how likely is it that a Daily Mail journalist is going to spend hours and hours trying to red team my system and then produce something embarrassing, which is a risk that we have to consider. So I think as you collect more data, you collapse the uncertainty around those estimates and you get a better idea of what the risks are. Because I mean, there's always risks, right? It's not like 0 or 1. It's like, how large are the risks, and is that palatable to us given the benefits that are provided by such systems? And I think we need to have those questions, and we need to be informed around those when getting our senior risk owners to consider, like, should we attempt to improve this service using this technology? And I think that's the right way to do it, because it balances the value for the taxpayer as well. If we can make our services more efficient, we have a responsibility to look after the public's money, and there could be efficiency savings here. So yeah, evaluate as you go. Think about your evaluation framework carefully. It's quite fun because it's a bit like the Wild West. No one really knows how to do it. So as a scientist, me and the team like to do it because we're planning experiments and like working out how to measure this stuff. So it's good fun, and we've been working through it. Hopefully, we'll be able to play back to the community at a later date.
And I guess to bring in Rosalie's question in the chat as well, Ravinder, the kind of use cases that you're seeing as part of your work, how are they kind of starting to address these?
I think the use cases what we have seen in government, they are quite different from one department to another, and the questions which were about that, how can we use responsible and explainable AI? That's where we need to be very, very transparent. What data we are using? Is it the data which is good? And how is it a black box which is being presented to the public, or can we explain that black box to the public? And can that be, as a responsible organization, this is a explainable AI which is to be given to the people that yes, this is what it is doing and why it is doing such thing. So that's where the data integrity, the data which we are collecting, and the bias removal has to be there. So we have to collect the vast amount of data rather than just one set of data. We have to approach that we have to have a different varied set of data, only then we can get the best results. And on the use cases, as Rosalie has put in the question, there are current use cases which we have discussed as pathfinders in the framework, as well as we will be publishing kind of what are the potential use cases which the government can do. And that would be a different document than this. But it will have that, yes, you can use this LLMs in a responsible way. And those guidelines are there that, yes, this is what, as we said, we have to do the grounding of the data, embedding of the data, remove hallucination, and human in the loop when they have to interfere in between. That, yes, at this particular point of time, the human interaction is required at the moment. It is still very, very important that the human in the loop makes that difference. So that's where I would go with. Of course, there you have seen that there is a regulation. Rate term has been used in a different way. That regulation of AI, internet and data, or responsible AI, responsible use of AI. So that's where those regulations, as the government is also working on that in November AI Summit on the regulation. So as Alex has said earlier, that we can be leader in the AI front, because we have the powerhouse, we have the knowledge, and we can lead the world in using this new technology in a more responsible and explainable way.
And I just coming to you then, Alex, and picking up particularly, I guess, Joseph's then question in the chat in terms of how do we, I think it's more around how do we kind of develop these things safely? Is there, how do we start to kind of put some of those guardrails how are you finding that from a kind of data security perspective in terms of setting out that kind of guidance and how that should happen?
Yeah, so yeah, thanks, Jenny. Before I hit that, I was going to just talk about potential benefits because something just popped into my head when Matt was talking and Ravinder around, yeah, this is the thing, it's potential benefits. It's like, how do we measure those benefits? Because at the moment, I think we're a little bit unsure, and all we've got to go on at the moment is some basically sales information from some of the big things, how great these things are. So I think that we do need, it is very important to focus on whether there is a net benefit of deploying these technologies for government. I think that's true, and that goes to the point about testing, which is a bit, I think, talking a little bit here around that could be testing for bias, testing for how productive it makes you, and also testing for any security holes in it. So I think all of those things are, as Matt was saying, it's an experiment now. No one knows how to do it. People are coming up with the ways of doing it, and it's exciting. So it is an exciting time to be sort of around this kind of subject. But yeah, I mean, in terms of what we're doing at CDDO, we're building the framework out, but we've also kind of convening a security group to sort of talk through and sort of share knowledge and expertise around what people are doing in this space, specifically on the subject of testing these things for security. And we're really taking our lead from what's being done wider, because there's already been lots and lots of work done out there, so we don't want to have to repeat any of that work. And the OWASP Foundation have done, they published this, they were very quick off the mark publishing that kind of list of top 10 kind of security concerns within LLMs. And so it's basically taking those and putting those into the scenarios that we might experience in government and seeing how those play out. And then it does become a kind of risk-based approach. So it's looking at the risks of that. And sometimes people come up and say, it's prompt injection, but what's the worst that can happen? I've heard that quite a lot. And which is true to a degree, because if you're just a user using a chatbot, you're feeding it the prompts, it's just sending you back, it starts talking like a pirate, why would you care? But I mean, but you can imagine, and yeah, you can extrapolate these things. And when we're talking about indirect prompt injections, where perhaps something is indexing data on your private tenancy or whatever, and say you've got some emails in your inbox, you've never read them, they have attachments, you've never looked into the attachments, but that's still forming part of your semantic index that's being searched by the tool in the background. Then someone could potentially introduce an indirect prompt injection into one of those and subvert that LLM. So it's thinking about those vectors and, yeah, basically looking at it from that perspective with the security hat on. But I think going back to my earlier point, it's really about, yeah, how do we test these things? How do we find out? How do we do those experiments to find out whether, one, it's worth doing it at all? Two, can we make sure it's safe and trustworthy? And I think those are unanswered questions at the moment.
So I'm conscious of time. I think we could go on all day. I've got loads more questions I'd like to chat with you guys about, and hopefully everyone's still enjoying it. I'm trying to kind of incorporate a few of these kind of questions in the chat, but if we don't get to your questions, and we'll ask the panel if there are things that they can send out or share or contact you afterwards. I'm going to come to final thoughts then. So just kind of going around the panel, if you could give one piece of advice for all of the 251 people on this call looking to make use of Gen AI in their organizations and answering that question that is, okay, what does this mean for our organization? What would be that one piece of advice that you would give them? And I think starting with yourself, Mike.
I was afraid you would start with me. One piece of advice. Yeah, I mean, I think that Alex and Matt are likely to have some, and actually everyone on this call, Lisa and Claire as well, are likely to have some probably more practical advice than I'm thinking. But for me, I think the main thing to consider when adopting this is really what do we mean, and this echoes what Alex was saying. What do we mean by benefit, right? What do we mean? Whose benefit are we saying that the use of a tool, or something, a generative AI tool, is going to translate to? And I think Matt probably will have some answers to that. But also thinking, more broadly about taking apart some of the marketing terms and even the sort of the familiar narratives around generative AI, questions about like what do we mean by efficiency, and what are we really gaining when we say that we've increased productivity? Are we actually winning anything? Are we actually accomplishing anything, or are we simply just adding more work onto people's plates because now they're more productive in one area of their work, and so that's freed them up to do twice as many things as they were doing before? I mean, it's not that we all get to go home early when we increase our productivity, right? We actually wind up working more. Same thing when we create, we've created new efficiencies. So that's great. Well, that doesn't mean that we actually suddenly have more taxpayer money. We actually have the exact same amount of taxpayer money. We just use it for something else, and probably we wind up spending more because now we have to buy or license the next new technology that's meant to increase our efficiency and our productivity. I mean, there's a lot of tail chasing that's going on in the conversation around LLMs, and I think the government is right to stress that we can use technology to increase efficiency and to make government work better. We all want government to work better. We all benefit when we use some government service and it works and we get a result quickly. I mean, how exciting when that happens, right? Opposed to the alternative. But I think we really need to strongly question the values that we're promoting here. Like, is productivity really more important than fairness, than morale among the civil service workforce, right? We need to attend to these questions in addition to questions like safety. We need to think about fairness. We need to think about quality of life, and most of all, we really need to think about how these tools are a part of the society we want to have. Like, not the society that is more efficient, but a society that is actually one that is one of shared prosperity and well-being for as many of us as possible. So, thank you.
And Ravinder, seeing how that's kind of playing out in terms of that wider use that you get to see across the public sector at the moment, what would be your kind of one piece of advice?
One piece of my advice will be around the use this new tools, whether it's AI or LLMs and the new technologies of blockchain or augmented reality, whatever you want to use, any emerging tech. Be responsible when you are using this new technologies, and think always one question in your mind: can you explain it to the other person that why I'm using it, and what's the benefit it's going to give it to you? And also, as a responsible citizen, we should be taking care of ethics, privacy, data, and sustainability, that what environmental impacts it is going to have. So that's what one piece of advice in short words I can give. Taking the time.
Lots of advice. Brilliant. Thank you. Matt, and yourself, being, living in it at the moment.
I think there's lots of great guidance out there, but Alex might say read the CDDO guidance. That'd be the first thing to do. But for a pragmatic perspective, we've got lots of interested people on the call who probably want to try and build stuff, and they're thinking about problems and innovation. And I think we should be encouraging innovation in the public sector. When you're scoping a project, compared to traditional software development, where the error rate's very low, using large language models in your systems increases the error rate. So I would look at the perspective of how costly is an error in that space, in that domain. So how inexpensive a mistake would it be? And if it's too expensive, such as giving guidance to someone to go and do something and then you get sued, then that should tell you early doors not to do that thing. So I think consider it from the perspective of how costly an error would be and what your appetite is for that. And that will help you settle on picking a good option to pursue. But happy building, have fun. I've enjoyed my journey over the last few months. Hopefully other people on this call will as well. Thank you.
And Alex, Matt, I feel Matt stole your thunder slightly there, but your kind of one piece of advice.
Is that to me?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So yeah, Matt stole my thunder. Yeah, I was going to say, read the generative AI framework from CDDO. It's going to be a real riveting read. What I would say about that framework is it's not a 2-pager. So there's been a lot of guidance. There's 2 pages. Yeah. It's not that. It's quite deep and quite broad actually, and you can kind of start in different places and work through. And it is trying to strike that balance between saying, being a bit of an Eeyore like me, don't do it. Basically, I was going to say, what's a big piece of advice? Just no. But no, that's no good. And actually being and saying, look, we don't want to stifle all innovation. These things are around. You can't deny it. You can't be a Luddite. You've got to go for it. But at the same time, do it responsibly. So yeah, I think my biggest. But saying that, I'm now going to be an Eeyore. So I'm going to say, like, for a developer, as a developer, an LLM as a component in a system is a completely different category of component. And I think that you should basically don't think of it as your friend. Treat the LLM as an inherently insecure black box. And all inputs into that box must be treated as potentially unsafe. And all outputs from that box must be assumed as untrustworthy. And basically, you just got to put mitigations around that. And there's plenty of things, and people are building the architectures now. And so that would be my takeaway from the developer perspective. But yeah,
Thanks,
read the framework.
When it's out, we'll give everyone the links. Claire.
So I'm going to post over some links in the chat window with specific tools and links to the standards which I spoke about. But I would also encourage us to think about remediations for when things go wrong, particularly in the public sector. If someone's experiencing a harm, how do they flag that up? What is the remediation there? How are they enabled to voice that harm and kind of what the impact was, so we can reiterate back and reform the systems in turn.
Thank you, Claire. And Lisa, your final piece of advice.
Yeah, so for me, I think it's about thinking about it really carefully. So thinking about the harms versus the benefits, and looking at the unintended consequences. I think it's about considering, the things like the IP, the personal data, the ethics, all the things you would consider normally, but actually this is magnified. And it's also about how you can deploy the tech. As there was some chat in there about, on-prem versus the internet versions and what you can do. So I think for me, it's about the consideration that needs to go into the upfront thinking to make sure that you're just going through this methodically and treating it as buyer beware, a bit like Alex said, really.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much, everybody on the panel. And thank you all for a very enthusiastic chat. It's been really interesting to read all the way through. I hope I've tried to represent some of the questions. I think I'm going to summarize what I've just heard as embrace, but be aware of the limitations. Check that there is actually benefit and it's the right thing to use. Be responsible and ask yourself, can I explain it to somebody and what would be the impact? Know what happens when things go wrong, because you should definitely plan for that. And understand the risks. So Matt talked about understanding how expensive it would be to make a mistake, but understanding the risks. I hope that was, as you said, Chantal, kind of food for thought for everybody. We will send out a follow-up with those links that Claire shared, with the links from others as well. We'll do a kind of sweep up of all the kind of questions and see if there's anything we can share that would answer any of those. But yes, very happy that the sidebar's been thinking very hard as well. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.